Have you ever wondered if your children have quietly taken over your life as you age? As we step into our 60s, 70s, and even our 80s, the lines between love, duty, and silent resentment can get blurry, especially when it comes to our children. It may start with love and support, but over time, you put your needs last, stay quiet, and lose control of your own time. In this video, we're diving into 5 quiet but powerful signs that you've unknowingly become a slave to your children. Not a parent, not a mentor, but someone stuck in a role that no longer serves your peace, health, or dignity. And here's why you should keep watching. Some of these signs may feel oddly familiar, but until you name them, you can't change them. And naming them might just help you reclaim your time, your choices, and your sense of self. Stay tuned until the end, because once you recognize these patterns, you'll see how small shifts can bring big freedom, not just from obligation, but toward a life that still belongs to you. Now, let's get started. Sign 1. Constantly putting their needs above your health. One of the clearest signs you've slipped into servitude is when your children's needs repeatedly come before your own physical and emotional well-being. It might seem noble at first, skipping your checkup because they need a babysitter, pushing back your medication refill to help cover their bills, or driving across town in pain just because they asked. But over time, this kind of pattern drains you both inside and out. When you consistently make choices that neglect your own body's signals, you're not just being generous, you're disappearing. You may tell yourself it's just for now, or that's what parents do. But when just for now becomes months or years, the cost becomes undeniable. Psychologically, this kind of behavior can stem from deeply rooted identity roles. Many older parents have built their sense of value around being needed, but there's a difference between being needed and being used. One brings fulfillment, the other erodes you day by day, and here's what makes it so tricky. Your children may not even realize it's happening. If you never say no, they assume you're always available. If you never show discomfort, they assume you're always fine. The cycle continues, not because they're cruel, but because you've trained them unconsciously to believe your limits are endless. Take Mary, a 74-year-old grandmother from Ohio. She started babysitting her daughter's 3 children 5 days a week after retiring. It was supposed to be temporary, but 5 years later, she was still spending 40 hours a week caring for the kids, missing her own book club, doctor visits, and even a long-awaited trip with friends. She loved her grandkids dearly, but eventually she admitted she didn't recognize her own life anymore. If this sounds familiar, it's time to ask yourself a hard but loving question. Are you helping out of choice, or out of fear of what might happen if you stopped? That distinction can tell you everything you need to know about where you stand. When your health and peace are constantly sacrificed for someone else's comfort, you're not parenting, you're surrendering. And you deserve better. Sign 2. Feeling guilty for saying no. The second sign is subtle but powerful. You feel guilty every time you say no, even when your reasons are perfectly valid. Guilt is a normal emotion, but when it becomes your default reaction to setting healthy boundaries, that's not love. It's emotional conditioning. Over the years, many parents fall into the habit of equating no with failure. They believe that if they don't show up every single time, they're somehow letting their child down. But that's not true. That's not love. That's guilt wearing a disguise. Here's the psychological root. When you've spent decades prioritizing your children's happiness, it can feel wrong, almost selfish, to prioritize your own. But growing older doesn't mean you owe them more. It means you've earned the right to reclaim space for yourself. If your child reacts with disappointment or frustration when you say not today, or I need to rest, ask yourself, are they responding to the boundary itself, or the fact that you've never set one before? There's a saying among therapists, the first time you set a boundary with someone who's used to having none, they won't see it as healthy, they'll see it as betrayal. That's not your problem, that's their adjustment. For example, take Roger, a 79-year-old retired teacher from Florida. Every Sunday he drove 2 hours each way to mow his son's lawn because my son works hard and I want to help. When his knees started bothering him, he hesitated to say anything. Eventually, when he did, his son offered to hire a gardener but added, I just thought you liked doing it. Roger realized he'd been suffering in silence, not because his son was demanding but because he had never voiced his own limits. If you say yes out of guilt, not joy or willingness, that yes becomes a quiet form of resentment. And that resentment doesn't just sit still, it grows. Saying no when needed doesn't make you a bad parent, it makes you an honest one. One who respects themselves enough to choose wisely rather than be ruled by obligation. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Sign 3. Giving financial support. You can't afford. The third sign is one that many older parents fall into without realizing how deep it goes. You continue giving financial support to your children even when it stretches your own limits or puts your retirement at risk. Let's be clear, helping out once in a while isn't the issue. The problem begins when giving becomes a pattern you can't sustain yet feel too obligated or too afraid to stop. Money is never just about money, especially within families. It carries deep emotional weight. Love, duty, guilt, fear of abandonment. You might think, they're struggling. What kind of parent would I be if I didn't step in? But ask yourself this, what happens when your kindness compromises your own stability? When you're hesitating to turn the heater on in winter just to cover your daughter's rent or delaying medical care so your grandson can go to summer camp? Here's the hard truth. Sacrificing your well-being for your adult child's comfort isn't noble. It's unsustainable. And often, it doesn't even serve them. It can create dependence, not resilience. Entitlement, not appreciation. And it sets a precedent that says, my needs come second, always. Take Helen, 74, who quietly withdrew from her monthly walking club to save gas money. Why? Because she was sending $300 a month to her son who just needed help getting on his feet. But that help had been going on for 3 years. When she finally mentioned she might need to cut back, her son replied, "But Mom, you always said you'd be there for me." And that's the moment Helen realized, he didn't see her as someone with limits. He saw her as a resource. If giving causes stress, resentment or fear, it's no longer giving. It's a transaction you feel forced into. And that's no way to build a healthy relationship. You have every right to say, I need to put myself first right now. You're not turning your back on your child. You're simply stepping into your own adulthood again. One where your security, peace and dignity matter just as much as theirs. And that's not selfish. That's smart. Sign 4. Being emotionally controlled by their reactions. The fourth sign is subtle but incredibly powerful. You find yourself adjusting your mood, your decisions, even your sense of peace based on how your children react to you. If they're distant, you worry you've done something wrong. If they're upset, you scramble to fix it, even when you don't know what you did. If they're cold, you shrink. If they're kind, you breathe again. This kind of emotional tether isn't love, it's captivity. When your peace depends on someone else's temperature, you've lost something essential, your center. It may have started decades ago when they were toddlers, and you had to regulate everything around them to keep them safe. But they're not toddlers anymore. And you're not just their parent, you're also your own person. Emotional dependency like this shows up in ways we rarely talk about. You delay plans with friends because your daughter might call and need to talk. You say yes to things you don't want to do just to avoid the sigh or the silence on the other end of the phone. You replay conversations in your head wondering if you said something wrong because they seemed off. And the worst part, over time it chips away at your self-trust. You stop asking yourself what you think, what you want, what feels right to you, because you're too busy monitoring their reactions like a thermostat. I remember George, a 78-year-old man I met through a community support group. His grown son, in his 40s, rarely called unless he needed something. But if George didn't pick up right away, he'd get a passive-aggressive message, "Guess I'll figure it out myself." And George, every time, would feel like a failure. A man who'd fought in 2 wars and built a business from scratch, reduced to a nervous wreck over a single missed call. And if that sounds like something you've experienced, you are not alone.